There's conversations at different points in hip hop about age within the hip hop environment, right? Hip hop having an age or hip hop having some form of cutoff point for certain artists. It's been a thing that has always been within hip hop because, hip hop has always been described as like being a young man's game. Young man's game is associated with being relevant, being cool, being, trendy, and just having, that kind of appeal to young people. So you look at it and you look at other genres and think other genres have been able to create music well into, their advanced ages and perform live and still do things that, they're physically able to do. Music is something that we've all, got some form of connection to, especially if you're interested in music. But I think the hip hop conversation, I always thought it was restrictive. I always thought that I can understand certain points about hip hop being, having a cutoff point. I can understand it. It doesn't mean I agree with it. I think a lot of the guys from yesteryear, hip hop artists, men and women from yesteryear, the effect that they had, the doors they opened, the legendary sort of moments they had, and some of them still doing their thing now. You find some artists, from yesteryear in the hip hop world performing in Europe, still having live performances and still doing things that are required, right? As an artist, still being relevant, quote unquote. But I think hip hop and its restrictions only came within the confines of hip hop. Like it was something that was just put upon themselves. Artists used to say sometimes, oh, I don't see myself rapping till 35 or 40, which is well within their, rights to not want to rap to a certain age. But just having that kind of mentality only was associated with hip hop. But if you look at today, for example, and you see someone like Nicki, you see someone like Drake, Kendrick, J. Cole, they're at a point you may say that they're getting to their advanced age in music. But if they were to leave today, if they were to leave anytime soon, you will see a massive financial hole in the game. And these are some of the artists that are one of the main, staples of the game, that if you look at it, there's no one that you can comfortably say, okay, these artists coming after them are going to fill the void potentially when they leave. Obviously, industry will always find a way and find maybe a new star, but they don't have that sort of perception because they're putting in the work and putting in the numbers. So you can't say that they have a cutoff point or there is some kind of, notion that they need to maybe look at, potentially other avenues because of their age. And I don't think it's right to think from that perspective. As long as the artist is maturing and the audience is maturing with them, the focus should be mainly on artist music quality, how it's evolved, and the impact that it's having on of the artist and what kind of message they're putting out. And I think with what I've mentioned, it just shows you that hip hop doesn't really have an age per se. And I think it's a conversation that the industry used to have or mainly have had, and labels and, assessing people based on how long they've been in front of us, how relevant they've been in the last, say, maybe couple of years. But as long as the artist is maturing and growing with their audience, then I think that's the main thing that should be looked at. I look at an interview. I remember an interview, and I'm sure, other people have seen it, from 2023. It was Andre 3000 had an interview and was mentioning that he, at times, doesn't have anything to say when it comes to rapping. Doesn't have any kind of lyrics that sometimes he can think of. Doesn't have anything that comes to his mind. And I think to myself, someone that's been in the game for the period he has, and on top of that, him experiencing life, I think he does have something to say. But I think sometimes the perception that has been created by hip hop fans, industry people, labels, like I said, contribute to artists thinking too much, overthinking things too much, looking at their age, looking at maybe how do I fit in. And certain artists that set the trends back in the day don't need to think from that perspective, because you've already set your lane. You've already showed the type of artist you are. You set pace. You set it. Andre 3000, for example, set a pace where people can look at him and say, I was inspired by him. Artists today can say that. A few artists can say that. So someone like him, he wouldn't need to have to really look at where he fits. He just needs to create music, again, that matures, evolves with his audience. And he has to find that. There are producers of yesteryear that are still around and current that he can work with. For example, that's just an example. And I think him not being able to come to some form of conclusion on the sort of raps that he can come with is mainly because of the sort of perception of hip hop having a cutoff point and hip hop having a sort of age restriction. Because I don't think someone like him, he would need to be trying to fit in. You know, he just needs to create. As long as he's got the groovy beats, as long as the beats fit his tone and fit his flow, he's got enough to say. I think he's seen a lot of life to have enough to say. I look at someone like Nas, the way he's progressed, the way he's managed to stay relevant to his strengths. He focused on what he knew well, acquired producers as time went on to give him the sound that he needed. He's proven, again, hip hop doesn't have a particular cutoff point or has a particular age. Artists don't need to think from that perspective, as long as they are doing what's required when it comes to keeping their sound, keeping their level up. And then obviously we, as you know, people that listen to music, will be able to make an assessment. And normally the assessment, as long as you're not showing desperation to appeal, it should come off as natural as possible. You know, so I think hip hop should get to a point where, as long as you want to rap, as long as you're relevant in your audience and within your audience, rap. If you don't, then you're going to make other ventures, and that's fine. But it shouldn't be, I'm not rapping because I don't see myself fitting. I don't see where I'll be able to create a lane for myself. I don't believe so. That mentality is only based mainly on the restrictive nature that hip hop has created within itself. And in order for that to be something that is eradicated, artists just need to make music that works for their fan base and test things. I look at artists also from certain eras. One thing I could say is they could use social media better. They could show us behind the scenes if they would want. They could show us elements of certain things that, you know, we would want to see as people that, you know, want to see what new artists or sorry, not new artists, what older artists are doing. We want to see what's really good out here, you know, with where they are in their life. So I think it needs to get to a point where, you know, we can look at examples. We look at current examples of artists, like I mentioned, the Nickies, the Drakes, the J. Coles, the Kendricks, of them setting the bar. We've seen the artists, Nas. We've seen what Clips have done over the years. We've seen what so many artists have done within a certain age group. But as long as you are remaining relevant to your fan base and staying within your creative sort of environment that you know works well, and you evolve on that, you should be fine. You should be fine, because that's what music is about. It's about creating and just being able to evolve comfortably, seamlessly, you know? So I think artists should look at that. I think the industry needs to look at it. And I think fans need to look at it. We know when something comes across natural, and we know when something doesn't. So the artists who are not looking desperate to appeal, we know that. And then the ones who are, we'll be able to make an assessment on that as well. But for the most part, artists just need to create music for their audience. And if they acquire new people on the way, then hey, that's good. But if not, the aim is to just continually evolve with the audience. But yeah, for me, I'll be interested to hear what people think on this, because yeah, the restrictive nature was not needed. What's needed is just creating for your fans, and the fans will generally go along with it as long as it's showing growth.